So without further ado, let's hear it from Ran, the CEO of Snip.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, this is a great place. So hi, I'm Ron. Can you hear me? Great. So I'm Ron, CEO of Snip. And Snip is a blockchain-based news platform. We're aiming to create the next generation of news based on the blockchain, and I'll explain thoroughly what that means and why the blockchain is such an important technology for news and for the media industry. And it's not obvious, because when you talk about finance or you talk about contracts or even insurance, it's pretty easy to understand why blockchain can be so disruptive. And even large corporations are looking at blockchain to solve many of their problems. But when you talk about media and content creation, it's a bit more complex, a bit more difficult. And I hope that after this talk, it'll be much more obvious why blockchain is so important in media and specifically in creating high-quality, reliable media, which is something that's become very important in the past few years. You're welcome to ask questions during the talk. It would be cooler if it was a conversation and not totally one-sided. But anyway, there will be room for questions at the end. So let's begin. So I'll start with a short history lesson. It'll be very brief, so don't worry. In the past, news publishers had a monopoly on the spread of information. There were local publishers and there were national publishers, and these publishers had editors who decided what's happening in the world. They can decide what's important and what isn't, and that's what people read. If you lived in a certain country, you were likely to read the news on 1, 2, or 3 specific platforms. And these companies were very, very successful financially. They monetized using both subscriptions and advertising. So I don't know if any of you are have seen recently these newsstands, but it was a thing. And people paid money to buy newspapers. I mean, it still happens, but obviously at a smaller scale. And inside these newspapers, there was also advertising. So this is an ad that represents probably the time. And we're talking about an industry of tens of billions of dollars of yearly revenue. And that's basically until 20 years ago. And what happened 20 years ago? Internet, yeah. So the internet came more or less 20 years ago. And it started with platforms like GeoCities. Maybe some of you have built a site there or written a blog. And more recently, technologies like WordPress and platforms like Facebook, Medium, which allow you to present your content to anyone. And that was a huge change, because now anyone can become a publisher. Like someone writes a Facebook post or a Twitter tweet and reaches tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people instantly. So now everyone's a publisher, and that dramatically influences the classic news publishers. So what happened? So subscriptions are very low today. People like free content online, and they're surfing the web and not inclined to pay for content, even high-quality content. And advertising is being more and more controlled by the large tech companies, by Facebook, by Google. Once your attention isn't limited to a single newspaper or a news outlet, but is mostly on Facebook, on Instagram, on Google, various platforms, YouTube, then most of the digital ad dollars also go to these places, to these platforms. And you can see here, this graph on the right is almost all of the growth in ad revenue has been going to these 2 platforms. They're very good at this. They're very successful. And this is creating a huge problem for the news publishers. And they're thinking how to handle this tectonic change that has been occurring in the past 10, 20 years, and in higher pace in the past 5 years. Like Google and Facebook have really pressed on it in the past years, and it's working very well for them. And how are publishers fighting back? So let's see. So a lot of entertaining content. So Leonardo DiCaprio might be a human puppy. Asteroid could hit the Earth. Like clickbait stories, entertaining stories, provocative stories, and also listicles. I mean, you've definitely seen these things online. 12 reasons why. Listicles of listicles, like 7 of the worst listicles. So That's pretty amazing, but that exists. So it's like, it wasn't hard to find examples for that. And in addition, surprisingly, creating longer stories. So you'd ask yourself, what's the connection between the revenue problem and longer stories? And the answer is ads. Like, the reason that content is much longer than it used to be is that that allows for more ad placements on a single page. So if a news outlet was successful in gaining your attention and making you click on something, they're going to capitalize on it as much as possible. And that makes sense, but that creates a very bad browsing experience. And it also creates low-quality content, because if an article could be summarized in 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then you're reading 15 paragraphs, then your time is basically being wasted, which is a shame. And their formula is like more text, more money. It's not across the board, of course. I mean, there are outlets who are like more concise and less, but this is one of the ways that they're handling this problem. And this, generally speaking, creates a bad experience for users. Like, if you want to read news today online, and I'm sure like many of you can relate to this, it's a pretty bad experience. You're reading a headline, you're not sure that it actually tells you what the story is about. You're not sure it's accurate. You're not, like, you don't really know who published it and what was the motive behind publishing that story. And that's what brought us to create Snip. Like, about 1.5 years ago, my co-founder Ronnie and I started working on Snip. And our idea was, like, we realized that these dramatic changes are happening in media, in news publishing. And we were thinking how we can change this. How can we create a different model which provides people with better news? And our vision is to build the future of news on the blockchain. So I talked for like a few minutes on why news is broken, why there's a major problem in news and in news monetization. But what does that have to do with the blockchain? Probably many of you are asking. And I hope the next few slides will provide you with a better understanding of this problem and the possible solutions. So how does the Snip solution look like? Basically, it's short stories on any subject in the world. You can see here from blockchain to medicine to health to business, any topic you care about. And it's short stories with an anti-clickbait headline. So this is like an important feature. When you read the headline, you already understand what the story is about to talk about. And if you're not interested in the story, you'll already know that when you read the headline, and that saves you a lot of time. And the story itself is 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs, which give you a concise summary of what's going on. Basically answers the question, what's the deal with, which like everybody basically is encountering all the time. Like, what's behind this story? I heard about this issue. I want to be informed about it, but I don't necessarily know where to find it or where to get a high-quality explanation on this topic. So that's what we're providing. And there's a thumbs up, thumbs down mechanism, which is private. And what it allows is, it allows you to say, I valued this piece of content. I think this was interesting. It doesn't necessarily mean you agree with it or agree with every part of it. But you can say, I didn't like this, or I did like this. And we're also providing options to flag content. So you can say, this content was very incomplete or very biased. And that provides us with more and more data whose goal is to create better news stories for you. So this is how the site looks like. This is actually live, so you can, live today, you can check out snip.today and just like see how it looks like and feel the experience. And underlying this, I mean, it's hard to see when you look at this. This is like a consumer-facing product, but underlying this is a community of writers who are constantly creating content on every subject in the world. A possible solution could be to build a large newsroom, to assemble a newsroom of journalists. But that wouldn't create the diversity and the decentralization that we're looking for. We want anybody to be able to create a news story and be rewarded for it. And underlying this is Snipcoin. So Snipcoin is a cryptocurrency, a new cryptocurrency, which allows advertisers to buy ad space on the platform, allows readers to buy premium services. For instance, one of the services that we're very excited about is a personalized podcast. So you can just press on a button and get 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the most interesting news going on, which is going on, according to your taste, not like some front page of a newspaper, but what you actually care about and what you're actually interested in. And the tokens, the Snip coins that are being paid, go to the writers. The writers are rewarded for creating great content. And this creates this ecosystem, this virtual, I'll put it here, like this virtuous cycle where writers are being rewarded for what they're writing, for great content, improving the product, like constantly creating more content. More users join the platform, and that, again, creates more, like encourages writers to join and creates more content. And it's pretty amazing. Today, there's no real way for someone to write content online and be paid for it. Like, that's a fact. Today, if you write something great wherever, either on your blog or in Medium or on Facebook, there's no real way to monetize it. I mean, banner ads don't work today. So part of what Snip does is allows anyone to create a great news story and be rewarded for that. So that's really important. And this couldn't happen without blockchain infrastructure. So Snipcoin is an ERC20 token, meaning it's not owned by the Snip platform, but it's decentralized and owned by the community. And we're applying smart contracts to be able to create great incentives for high quality. And I'll try to explain what that means. For instance, we're rewarding writers with more tokens if they keep the token for a longer period. So this allows writers to be interested in the long-term health of the platform and not trying to capitalize on a short-term gain in tokens. So that'll be like one use of smart contracts. Referrals are also a great way to use tokens, to use smart contracts to make sure content is better. And we're making the content available everywhere. This is extremely important. Content today isn't available to anyone, anywhere, and putting all of the Snip news on IPFS, on the IPFS protocol and platform and technology, allows anyone in the world to access Snip if it's available. So this is basically a new approach to news which combines several different values, several different characteristics. So it's decentralized. Anyone can create news. Anyone can own tokens and reward other people for their contributions. It's transparent, which is, we find that very important. Everyone knows why they're seeing what they're seeing. Our open source algorithms, which tailor the content to you, you can see why you received that story, which is, like, again, something that doesn't exist today. Corporations are afraid to show you why to tell you why they showed you something on your feed. Rewarding, so like I said, people will actually be rewarded for creating content, creating news content. And extremely important is the diversity. There is no editor in Snip. Like, there is no central person or entity which decides what's fit for print, what's true and what's fake, but a platform which encourages high quality, real content. And it's important to talk a bit about how such a platform can actually fight fake news when that's what you're focused on, when you're focused on creating high quality content. And this is sorry? That's okay. So these are three main methods that we're applying to fight fake news. We're also planning on adding more and more ways to disincentivize low quality and fake content and incentivize great content. So first of all, rewarding quality and not clicks. Today, many platforms reward you based on the number of people who clicked your content, who liked it, who commented, who shared it. And that incentivizes provocative content, it incentivizes exaggerations, fake news, and etc. On Snip, if the content you publish is found to be low quality, even if a lot of people clicked it, you won't be rewarded as much. So that's a first method, which is very important. Second of all, readers decide who they trust. It could be asked if there. So it's not only, yeah, that's a great question. It's not only if you like it or dislike it, but is it valuable? Like, is the content actually real? I mean, flagging, like there's like and dislike. So the users press like or dislike according to their preference, and that gives you a hint on the value it's providing. But also, there's the question of, did people flag this as incomplete, as low quality, as fake? Did the writer have to issue a correction? Yeah. And the idea is we're adding writers slowly and not opening it to everyone on day one, with the goal of gradually adding more and more ways to measure that question of what's high quality, what's real, what's fake. Yeah, sir. Sure. So the most important things that we'll be shipping on day one is the ability to both vote and various flags. So there will be, I mean, we haven't closed on a figure, but we'll probably be 5 different categories that can be either biased or incomplete or just fake. There can be different categories. Because a biased article doesn't necessarily feel the same as a completely bogus article. Like the asteroid hitting Earth, killing us all, isn't really the same as I don't know. So, yeah, that's a really interesting point. We don't believe that your vote should be worth more according to the tokens you have, because so our yeah, that's something we've been thinking about a lot, because we want if someone is able to create a lot of fake accounts, then that creates 2 main problems. The first is that writers are incentivized in a wrong way, and you're not able to find the really high quality content. And we plan on using various methods, like machine learning techniques. My co-founder is very experienced in machine learning, and we're both technical co-founders. And the idea is to create a pattern which says this user is real, is acting real, and there are certain behaviors of a real user that are different from a fake user. And over time, as we gain more data, it's also easier to see, it's harder, the more data you have, the harder it is to fake it with a small group of users. If you tell your friends, hey, y'all should vote for me, and you create some accounts, over time, that'll be less and less useful, because once you're talking about millions and tens of millions of users, then that probably will be a drop in the bucket.
And one more point.
Sure.
You said about transparency, as far as how you got shown that now is that transparency you can choose the algorithm, so you can do your own sorting. You can still use the platform, but you're going to use your own algorithm to use the inappropriate flags, thumbs up and thumbs down to filter the way you want, or is that going to be set centrally on the point level at protocol level?
Sure. So we think that it's important that you're able to choose your own method. I mean, we're going to offer a default way to browse the platform, because you have to have some basic way to use the product. But if you decide I don't like how this is showing things to me, then you'll be able to choose something else. And we're also planning to allow people to create a contest. How many of you are familiar with the Netflix contest? So, okay. So, yeah, you're hired. So, what Netflix did, and we thought it was very interesting, and we plan on doing something similar, is present users with data, developers with data, and allow them to try to create a better algorithm than you currently have. We're going to say, hey, these are our users, anonymized. All the data will be anonymized. These are our users. This is the content that they rated. Try to find the fake users. Try to find the best algorithm that connects the data to them. And people will be rewarded for that. So that's we plan on constantly engaging the community to create better and better content and better algorithms to find that content. Yes?
Fact checking is incredibly hard. Is there any incentive
So, so that's a great question. I think it relates very strongly to readers decide who they trust. We'll be able to offer you a fact-checking service that Snip, like as a company, will subsidize. We'll make sure we'll like incentivize directly people who fact-check the most like popular or a large group of stories, and will encourage people to trust, to look at these fact checkers and decide who among them they trust. There will never be completely objective fact checking. I mean, it's like, there are easy facts and there are hard facts. When you talk about like the earth revolving around the sun, it's much easier. But when you're talking about a healthcare bill, then like saying this is an exact fact is tougher. And we don't plan to like provide the answer. We're not going to say, hey, we fact checked and this is our fact checking. But we will say, hey, this is a pretty common fact checker, and we think that it could be a good idea to trust him. And you could say, no, I don't trust him. They're biased in some sense, and that's fine, like from us. So we're giving readers a lot of a lot of space to decide what they trust. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so those are like two really important questions. I'll start with the first one and then like move on to the second. So the first question was, how do we avoid? I'm paraphrasing a bit, but I hope it makes sense. How do you avoid the echo chambers? Like people inside their echo chamber rewarding content that they like, not necessarily that is accurate or high quality, but just the content that they like. And there are two parts, like two answers to that question in our view. First of all, we're going to try to educate the users that the like and dislike button isn't agree or disagree. And part of that is making that vote private. So once the vote is private, like on Facebook today, if you like something, then your friends are likely to see like, hey, Ron liked this European campaign for president. And now it's like, okay, so Ron is right wing, right? Ron is left wing. And once the vote is private, people will be less incentivized to just like or dislike according to their preferences. But in addition, and something that's even more important, is that there's a spectrum of opinions. So like if there's the extreme right and the extreme left, then the more a piece of content overlaps, then probably the more accurate it is. So if someone who is right-wing reads a left-wing opinion and still can value it, and you can, once you reach enough users, you can actually see that in the data, then you're able to get a much better clue, like say, okay, this is probably something that's more objectively valuable. Like I can look at this piece of content and say, yeah, it probably has merit. Like if there's only a small group of people which is very like typical, which is rewarding a certain piece of content, then the algorithms will take that into consideration and will incentivize that in a much like weaker sense. Sorry? So, yeah, so what like our model is that we'll have a website, like a centralized website where you can access Snip. And the reason for that is that you have to have an easy default way to read news on the platform. Like my mother, she doesn't know what IPFS is, and frankly, she doesn't really care. But she does want to read great news. So you have to provide her with like a platform where she can read content. In addition to that, you can read it anywhere you want. So if you're accessing the content raw on IPFS, then probably we won't be able to present it to you with a special like. The algorithms will be open source, so you'll be able to like build a website that presents it to you in a way that you find fit. But it won't be us. Like it will only be our content and our algorithms, but not our like our data. I'll try to answer the second question. We don't have that all solved yet. I mean, we plan to incentivize people to flag low-quality content. I'll just like say the question again. Like what he asked, I hope I'm rephrasing it correctly, is how do you use the blockchain, or how could you use the blockchain to actually encourage the flagging of fake news and reward people who flag fake news? So, like I said, we don't have that all figured out today. We plan on using the Snip token to encourage people to flag content and reward them if they're right and punish them, quote unquote, if they're wrong. We don't have, like, it won't be a minor system. Like, it won't be a completely decentralized method to do that. And we're still building it. Like, the idea of how to exactly incentivize people, and I'm sure it will evolve. I mean, we'll start with something, it'll be very public and very obvious for everyone how it works, and over time, like, we'll gain on that feedback and evolve the product. Just this third point, because I think it's extremely important, we're fixing the virality problem of fake news, and part of the virality problem is that viral fake news, like fake news can be very viral. It's very engaging, it's very interesting, it's very exciting, and it can reach tens of thousands of shares or retweets and reach millions of people. And that's just like a fact of life. People love to share engaging content, and the correction that says, oh, actually that's not really true, nobody shares that. Nobody's like, hey everyone, it turns out that like, what I shared was wrong. So if you use the mainstream platforms today, you don't get the correction, you just don't see it. And like the data constantly shows this. And what Snip will allow is that if a story has been debunked and you saw the original story, then you'll actually see the correction. You'll actually see the complementary story, which explains why the original story was mistaken or inaccurate or fake. And that's something that really doesn't exist today, a way to make sure that people are informed on what's going on. And you see that everywhere. It can be not only like, people always think of like fake news in politics, but there's in health, and there's in business. Like it's everywhere, like inaccurate news, fake news. And using this, like fixing the virality problem at its source, like what people are viewing and what their friends are viewing, we find that to be very, very important. And that's also something that'll be on Snip on day one. A bit about our timeline. Sure, yeah, I'll go back so people won't be distracted. So we don't have control. Like once someone leaves the Snip platform, obviously we don't have control over like where it is. But what? Yeah. On our platform? No, the writers will be attributed. We'll talk about, like, I think the timeline thing will answer that. So, like, maybe we'll hold on that question for like 2 minutes, and if the next slide doesn't explain that, then just ask me again. So where are we today? Like, I've been talking about like the platform and how it works and why it's so exciting, at least for me. So what have we been doing? So we started with Snip 1.0, our first version, and this wasn't decentralized or based on the blockchain. It was us working with in-house writers and freelancers who are creating new stories in the same format, though, in a short, concise, interesting way, like a knowledgeable friend would. And we reached 30,000 users last October, offered a subscription service, and actually converted many of those users to paying subscribers, which was like a very strong validation for us. People were actually willing to pay for this kind of high-quality content, which is amazing. But now we're taking it to the next level, and we're using the blockchain technology to do that. So first of all, like I said, our platform is live today, so you can use like Snip today. But in September, in about 3 weeks, we'll already be offering the personalized podcast product. So you'll be able to press a button and hear news that you actually care about on Snip. So that'll be pretty soon. We're very excited about that product. And we're officially launching the open product in January, which will allow anyone to sign up as a writer and start spreading content and receiving the necessary attribution. So people will you'll be able to subscribe, similarly to YouTube, you'll be able to actually subscribe to a certain writer that you value and make sure that you read their content and have access to their stories. And oh yeah, we're also integrating a tipping option for using your Snip coin. So if someone, like today on Reddit, someone can write something amazing and receive Reddit Gold, but it's really hard for most people to understand what that means or even use that for something. Like I received Reddit Gold for something and I didn't really know what to do with that. So with Snip coin, we believe this tipping will be much more significant. Like someone writes a great comment and he receives some tokens from a friend or a stranger, that's a great experience. Like, okay, that'll encourage more creation of great content. So that'll be on January. And in mid-September, we're launching the Snip token sale, where we're selling the tokens to the public. Our goal is for the token to be used by our community of readers and writers. So we're using this token sale as a way to engage the community and spread the word about Snip and allow people to buy the token and then use the token on the platform, both for subscription services and for tipping and for everything else. Yes? So the question was, do readers have to have a wallet? And as you can probably see, the Snip is a product for the masses. Like part of our stated goal is to bring blockchain to the masses. I'll elaborate a bit on that and then get to your question. Like, if we use the internet analogy, so there are a lot of people who are building the infrastructure of blockchain, and it's extremely important. Like, how to create, or how to move the bits and bytes on blockchain. And that's similar to like building server technology and TCP and IP in the internet age. What we're trying to do is build an app based on blockchain with underlying blockchain technology, which is available to tens of millions of people. And the idea is that just like people today use the internet and don't have to understand how the internet works or what TCP/IP even means, they're still able to enjoy that experience. And that's our goal also for Snip, so people will be able to be on Snip and enjoy it without understanding what a wallet is or even understanding what a token is. But we found that'll probably work because it already works today on several virtual platforms. Like there are Second Life or World of Warcraft. There are several platforms which are immensely popular, and people have things of value which are virtual and can be traded, and they work. Like people don't have to understand like what a hashing algorithm is to enjoy a platform and even trade on that platform and like share coins, share items, etc. And we hope that we'll be able to frame it in that way, in a way that's easy for people to understand and use. So, yeah. So, on the other hand, anyone who wants to store their tokens by themselves will be able to. So we're not we have no goal to gain from holding your tokens. On the contrary, That's actually quite a big of a challenge that we're trying to avoid. Like, we don't want to be a money transmitter. So holding like billions of Snip coins on our servers, like, we have no interest in doing that, and we hope to, like, as technology evolves, your app can be your wallet. Your security questions can be your wallet. We're hoping to decentralize that as soon as possible. Today, a bit like I said, blockchain technology isn't there yet. So you can't like transfer $0.1 on blockchain, but it'll happen like in several years. Yeah.
So I have a two-part question. The first part is it won't be legally clear how much the content generates. Like, is there a way of them knowing by joining this platform and generating how much money they'll be making?
So it's a bit tough because similarly to YouTube a bit, it depends on like how popular the content is. Like, the more that you're as a creator subscriber based, meaning like people are subscribing to your content, not necessarily paying, the more it'll be obvious how many tokens you'll be rewarded. Because if you
Familiar with Steam?
sure.
Steam, so for example, Steam quite a bit. And the thing about Steam is it attracts like everybody to be posting something, hoping for a little bit of money, right? And I find that the quality can go out of control, right? It's
Yeah.
all over the place. And so like how do you guys? It's pretty much a similar ecosystem to the user. And like how would you like prevent that from happening?
So that, I mean, Steam is like a really interesting model, and we've been studying it a lot because it's like content and content creators are valued online. Steam it? Okay, so yeah, so Steam it is basically like, I'll generally like paraphrase. It's a blogging platform, like a blockchain-based blogging platform, where people can vote on different stories and reward them with Steam power or Steam dollars, depending on several mechanisms. It's a bit complex, like exactly how Steam works, but that's the general idea. There are several things that we really like about Steam. Things that we intend on doing differently is, first of all, we don't think that people should get more tokens, like get a stronger voice based on the number of tokens they have. Like, it's basically like some sort of message that the richer you are, the more your voice counts, like crudely speaking, and we don't really relate to that. But, and in addition, we're really focused on news. That's important. Like, Snip won't be a blogging platform in the foreseeable future. Like, on Steam, it's very, very hard to like stay in the know by reading Steam. Like, if you enter Steam today, and you're welcome to do that on your mobile device, it'll be very surprising if you can just like, oh, this is what's happening in the world, or in the US, or in business, or in tech, or whatever, because that's just like not what the platform is. And the way to incentivize news stories will be, will have to be technology. We'll have to be like adapting our algorithms to do exactly that, to like advance various news topics and advance things that are widely, like that a lot of people are actually interested in. And we plan on helping writers do that, which is like very important for us. Like, if the writers aren't happy, the platform won't succeed. Like, you can't have an ecosystem of writers and readers, or writers and readers and advertisers, when the writers aren't happy. Like, so part of what we're doing is that we've developed algorithms which scan the entire internet, like Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, whatever, and find what's going on right now. What's the most engaging stories? What's developing online? What are the topics that people are interested in today? And we plan on recommending these stories to writers. So as a writer, you can write about whatever you want. But if you're interested in gaining a large audience and creating something that's engaging, we'll help you do that by saying, hey, this is something interesting that's developing right now. If you write on that, you'll probably reach a very large audience. So I hope that answers the question. That'll help you make sure that you reach a large audience. And
It's just like I feel when the founders of Steam came out with their white paper, they had a very similar message to probably what you're doing today. Right? It's kind of like what they have with how it's applying itself is radically different from how they envisioned it.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that's right.
Yeah, and we just like, like obviously are planning to constantly iterate on that. But if the writers aren't happy, it won't be a mainstream product. So we're constantly focused on how to create a great experience for writers. I think you're first. Yeah. So I'll repeat the question. Uh, so the question is, there are many people in the blockchain system who are trying to address media's problems in various different ways. That's also true with Brave and Bat, by the way, and the product that they're offering. We hope to cooperate as much as possible when it makes sense. So I think it'll be harder to cooperate with Steemit because they have their own separate platform, and it's hard for me to see like how that would work together. On the other hand, ecosystems like or technologies like Poet or even Brave, we'd be very happy to integrate inside Snip and work together and like build, like expand on the ecosystem. I think one of the things that the last few years have proven is that if you're building a platform and are willing to cooperate and like add applications on top of that platform, that makes you much stronger and like, improves your value proposition. Yeah, I'm sorry, just him first. Sure. So the question was, do we worry that that there will be a liberal bias on the platform based on people who are interested in blockchain? It could happen. Like we don't control who buys the tokens, and we're not interested in being a liberal or conservative or something else platform. I mean, that's not what we're trying to build here. And I think it's the same answer, though, that I gave earlier regarding finding consensus issues. So if there's if a single story crosses like several political ideologies, then it's probably pretty high quality and pretty objective. And if something is limited to a small group of people, even if there are a large percentage of the users of the platform, then we'll be able to flag that and make sure that it's treated as such. Personally, I'm not really worried about that. I think blockchain is very diverse. Like there are people from everywhere, and our users will be even more diverse because you don't have to be a blockchain enthusiast to enjoy Snip. And like I said, your vote doesn't count more if you have more Snip coins. So we're not really concerned about that. But in addition, because we want a diverse audience, we plan on limiting the number of tokens that any one person can buy in the crowd sale. So we hope that our token holders are actually a pretty wide variety of people and ideologies. Yeah. Sorry.
I have two queries. The first one is if you're using algorithms to basically scout for Google and Facebook links, find the biggest news stories, and then encourage your writers to write about, are you not just reinforcing what is already news bias? I mean, almost what I would like you to do is find the smallest news stories and then get the writers to write about them instead.
Okay, I'll start with that one. So that's a great question. The question was, aren't we reinforcing biases by recommending to writers the stories that are already gaining like too much popularity? And the answer, like our answer to that is it really depends how you approach it, like how you present that data and how you bias it. Like today in the news, many stories receive, like, it doesn't matter what your opinion is, like the amount of attention the White House is getting like these days is amazing. Like you enter a news site, that's everything that's going on. And we believe that like the content should be diverse. So if two writers already wrote about a single Washington politics story, we'll start encouraging writers to write about more topics, like trying to diversify the stories, because there are a lot of important things going on. And that's really an important issue, because today, many times in media, they're constantly covering the same subject and delving into it because it's clickable. Because like people say, like, you can write something outrageous that some politician said or wrote or tweeted, and that'll get a lot of clicks. On Snip, we plan on encouraging, like, okay, you understood this story. This is like 3 or 5 paragraphs on what's going on there. If you read that, let's show you something else. Like, let's expand your horizons and like help you read other stuff. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, so second was I'm not convinced that the fact that you can encourage people to value something, and then the more it's valued, the more objectively valuable it is, because often the kind of common wisdom is actually wrong. Often people don't think about something hard enough to really come across an objective truth. So 90% of the population believes in a common wisdom, then that's going to just be believed more and more. So I don't really see how your platform is really genuinely tackling fake news or fake truth on a wide scale basis.
Sure. So, like, the question was, if a large majority of people believe something that's fake, won't the platform reinforce that and like continue to spread fake news? Our aim is that like this will be the most important way to solve that problem. So, if we're offering our readers people who are trustworthy, who are high knowledge, like who are authorities in their fields, and are considered objective, considered people who have a deep understanding of the field, we believe that could really help readers. And we won't be using one single parameter like popularity to decide if something is valuable, but we'll be relying also on thought leaders in various fields and incentivizing them to like spread their knowledge. So I won't comment on their craziness, but like I'll repeat the question because I'm not sure everyone heard. If people on two sides of the aisle, like who are on extremes, both can be considered authoritative thought leaders, that's a problem that we won't be able to solve. Like it's a human problem. It's a basic problem of human psychology, which, yeah, like there are issues that can be solved. Like in a single story that's going on today, you can like hold on to several like basic facts that are underlying many of the stories. Not like everything. There are things that are subjective, but like saying this bill intends to do something, or this bill will cost something, and there are some ways to objectively assess that. There are other issues in human psychology that we won't be able to solve. Like if someone trusts an untrustworthy person and they don't want to hear the truth, they don't want to, like, they're not interested in hearing the other side, and they're genuinely not interested. Like you can't, even if you push it to them, they just like don't want to hear it. We don't think that we can solve that issue like by ourselves because it's inherent. Like you say, hey, this is this fact, and then they say, okay, I don't care about that fact. So, like we don't believe that could be solved, but we also don't think that that's the main thing that's going on in news today. Like news today is very incentivized to be provocative, to be extreme, to give something that's exciting and weird or crazy, even if it's not true, because that's where the clicks are, that's where the ratings are. And we think that we can change. Like the economic incentives can change, and economic incentives are very important. Like many analyses of how media has changed in the past few years relate to how incentives have changed and how like control of the ad market and the subscription markets has changed. So wait, I'll just like, I think he had a question first. No? Okay, so. Yeah, that's interesting, yeah. We believe that we're planning on capitalizing on any advances that there are in that technology. Today, most ERC20 tokens like work by themselves, but the more these options are available and the easier it is to use them, we plan on like using additional technology in it, like on top of ERC20. Yeah. Okay, so that's an amazing question, and I forgot to mention that. So the question was, how do we encourage writers, or are we encouraging writers to incorporate fact-checking and highly reliable sources? And we discussed this quite a bit in our white paper. We actually are planning on requiring writers to say what this information is based on. So we don't tell them like this is the only outlet which is legitimate, but someone has to say, hey, I read this, like this is based on this Wikipedia story, exactly like citations, or according to the New York Times article this, or according to a Fox News report this. And that's mandatory, like on stories. And something that we're really excited about is part of the tokens will be rewarded to the original reporting. So our hope is to be the number one contributor to Wikipedia. Like many news articles actually base some of their reporting on Wikipedia. So we're giving at least 10% of the tokens for each article to the original reporting, to the sources that the writer bases their information on. So that'll be quite an incentive because they have to write it. Like they have to base it on something.
Sorry, can you elaborate on that? How does that work?
So that part in the current stage will be centralized, like will be managed by us. So, and we're like part of the token sale is that there will be a fund designated for writers. So 20% of the tokens will be specifically designated as rewards for writers in our community. And when we reward writers for their content, we will also, actually transfer funds to the source. So Wikipedia will, like every week or every month, will publicly say how much we transferred to a single source. And it'll be like publicly available to anyone who wants. If a news outlet isn't cooperating, like it doesn't want the money, then we'll handle it, I guess. But we think that pretty quickly they'll want the money. Like, and it could also be for blogs. Like if someone wrote a blog and someone wrote a summary of that blog, then the blog writer we will contact them and offer them the tokens. If someone's not cooperative, then okay, then we'll keep the tokens or transfer them to the writer. But we're less worried about that. Yes. How do we make money? So Snip is not a foundation. I mean, it is a company whose goal is profit. And eventually, we plan on taking a cut of the money that of the tokens that goes to writers. It'll take a while. Like we understand that. We expect in the next several years to probably bring a very large portion, if not all of the tokens, to writers because we want to grow the community and transfer as much funds as possible to writers. But we're pretty confident that if this platform, when this platform becomes successful and when it becomes popular, then it'll also be profitable. Which Google product? Google Ads. Yeah, AdSense. So that's a great question. The question was like, why do writers need a platform if there's already AdSense, which allows them to monetize their content? And the problem with AdSense is that it's becoming less and less effective as time grows. And if you have a blog, and this is like considered everyone in advertising pretty much agrees on this. If you're not reaching massive scale with your blog, which is something that's very, very hard to do, you're not going to gain any money. Like, you have to, like, even if thousands of people value what you're doing, and even if they want to tip it, they either use Patreon, which is a great service, but like on AdSense, basically no one is really making a lot of money today. And also, it's becoming a smaller and smaller share of Google profits. Like, even in Google, it's becoming less and less important, and they're basing on other ad products. Yeah. So the question was, can we use the blockchain to also attribute a story to an original writer? And that's actually a pretty common idea regarding like blockchain, like how to apply the blockchain to copyright. And I believe Poet is doing something like pretty similar to that. Like, yeah. So. Yeah, so the content will be available for everyone, and hopefully, if it'll be possible, we'll also integrate with Poet. I will say that won't solve all the problems, because many times someone creates a piece of content and it's stolen or copied in some way, and like the problem isn't the attribution many times, or it's just like theft. Like someone somewhere around the world publishes something, and you don't really have any way to pursue the case in court or do anything to get a portion of that profit. So, I mean, it'll solve part of the story, and you'll be able to say, I wrote this first, or I produced this piece of content, but not necessarily like get rewarded for that. Yeah.
First of all, I want to say keep doing what you're doing. That's a huge problem, and it's easy for us to criticize, but
No, it's great.
something else. And I was just curious about your fundraising. You raised the traditional angel or venture capital to launch Snip 1.0, and why did you decide to do ICO versus pre-seed?
Sure. So, first of all, thank you. The question was, how does our funding look like? Like, what funding rounds have we passed? So we started, like Ronnie and I have been working on this full-time since last May, it's already like 15, 16 months. And for about a year, we worked on it full-time without funding, because we were just like really passionate about news and how to create like a new model for news. We then raised a small angel investment, something that like to hold us a few months. And the token sale is like, we found it to be a really great way to both engage the community and also allow for us to continue developing the product and like building the ecosystem. We don't think that this could exist without additional funding. I mean, the product is viable, and like you can buy it today, but over time, to maintain that product and keep it competitive, like in this like very brutal media market, you have to raise some sort of funds. Oh, okay. Okay, so that's a great question. We've been asking ourselves, like, what parts of, oh, sorry, I'll repeat the question because maybe not everyone heard. Like, basically the question is like, why do we need blockchain for this? And specifically, which parts need blockchain and which parts don't really need it? So the thing about, like, the reason that blockchain is so important in Snip and why it probably wouldn't be possible without it is the management of incentives. So, like, part of what, the reason miners are mining on the Bitcoin ecosystem isn't because they're Bitcoin believers, even though some of them probably are, and that's great, but because they have some incentive to like maintain the system and make it successful and keep it secure. And many of what blockchain is much of what blockchain is doing is aligning incentives between different stakeholders. So in our case, we have a company, which is Snip. We have readers who want to see great content. We have writers who want to be rewarded for creating great content. And we found that without using a single mechanism which unites all of them, which aligns the incentives, it'll be very hard. It would be very hard to do that. It would be very hard to create a platform. I wouldn't say it's impossible. Like if you put in enough money, like if you put in probably hundreds of millions of dollars, you could probably like initially create those incentives and then like work as you go. But for a startup to do that today, I think it would be basically impossible. Like, and there's a reason we think that there aren't companies who are trying to do that in a traditional sense, because incentivizing writers with cash has a lot of drawbacks. Like there's a lot you can't do when you're working with like cash incentives, which you can do with the blockchain. So that's very important. There are other things that are just like great features that we love using the blockchain because it's like really useful. For instance, like IPFS. It's an amazing technology which allows anyone in the world to access our information. Snip could survive without IPFS. I mean, it could work anyway. But like, the values of the blockchain technology are actually very important and very aligned with what we're doing. Like, if we want anyone to access great content, then it aligns well with the blockchain. So I hope that like answers the question. The additional stuff is like less mandatory, and like the token and the incentive mechanism is really important. And that's why I also started the talk with like how incentives in media are built. It's not like just for the fun history lesson, but actually like why the media industry works like it does. Like we think that's very important. Okay, so. Okay, how can you help? That's a great question. Basically, join the platform. Like start using Snip. We're opening our bounty program pretty soon, and we'll already be rewarding people with tokens for creating great content. So that's starting like next week, which is amazing. You should follow us and like see how that goes. Like become users of the platform. That's what like we're evangelizing. Like come use Snip, understand what it is, tell your friends like about the product, and of course we invite everyone to like buy tokens in the token sale and then use them on the platform, like tip, like pay for subscription services and whatever. We think that it'll be very cool to be a part of this like amazing revolution that's going on with news. So, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ran. This is an intricate problem. There are many nuances to it. I'm sure you have a lot more questions. They'll be here. You can chat with them.